Hello everyone, Pulse here for more Forging Fantasy EverQuest Next. Now in this video we're going to dissect the most recent roundtable response video, which was all about how the players will consume the lore of EverQuest Next. Now I will openly admit that I watched this little vlog production not expecting much of anything to talk about, but actually I was pleasantly surprised to get some nice little tidbits about their design process and their philosophies behind how they want to get the player to consume their lore, and it kind of goes into this tangent into something a little bit more interesting than just plain lore consumption. So first and foremost, the title of this roundtable response, number 15 if you're curious, is consuming lore, and that's what they are talking about, at first at least. Now, we learned from these guys that they looked at the polls and the majority of the players are fine with more of a mix of lore consumption methods, and that be cutscenes, dialogue from NPCs, text in their dialogue box or through like the little thought bubbles, or reading in-game books, and even outside sources such as wiki sites and that sort of thing. Most of the players are fine with a nice mix of all of these. They don't want to kind of have an out of balance situation where you just get text thrown down your throat 100% of the time, and it just gets laborious and boring when all you have is text and text and text and more text. And the same would be said about cutscenes. If you just have unending cutscenes, it takes you out of the game world, right? So SOE is taking all of that into account, and they're going to try their best to stay balanced in the way that they provide lore to the players if they want to consume it in the first place. That's one of the other things they said. They understand that sometimes the game comes first, and having that lore shoved in your face doesn't make the game experience any better. If you want to consume the lore, it will be there for you, but they are not going to shove it down your throats 100% of the time, especially because doing so is kind of clunky and oftentimes out of context with the actual gameplay that you are doing. Now this kind of leads into the remainder of their discussion, which again was kind of this tangent into something more interesting, more intriguing, and that's the idea of dynamic events. Now, this is not me confirming dynamic events because those words were never said. Now, we've known about dynamic events through their voxel system, how they can kind of patch these events in, but not in the way of like a questing system of sorts, I guess is the easiest way to describe it. And the way that they were talking about it is they want to keep players engrossed in the game world as the way to consume lore, instead of having just tons and tons of quest texts or cutscenes and quest givers and all of these things that are a more traditional quest system. And instead they'll deliver the same message, the same lore, through a more dynamic system where you will just interact with the world and interact with the events. Now, the example that they gave during this video was that orcs could be attacking a village out in the wild, right? And you happen to be adventuring on by or just doing your own thing, and you can then make the choice to intervene or let the events play out. You can interact with the events that you see, you can interact with them as you see fit, and if you are interested, you can consume the extra details for that particular story, for that particular happening in the aftermath of that event. Now, that alone sounds a lot like the dynamic event system that's in a similar vein to Guild Wars 2, but what really sealed it for me as kind of a dynamic event system similar to that was when they were talking about how you can fend the orcs off, but if you don't, you'll be able to see the destruction in the village that you didn't save for whatever reason, and the story will change. It will veer off towards something maybe where you're chasing the orcs back to their hideout and you have to retrieve their stolen goods or whatever else kind of thing. And this idea of branching story threads sounds a lot like a dynamic event chain. It sounds very familiar, does it not? So then, coming off of this kind of talk about how they want us to consume lore through dynamic events, it looks like that SOE is jumping on the bandwagon of sorts and looking to implement a dynamic event system which is meant to offer a more realistic adventure and a more immersive world. And I'm actually very excited about this, I suppose, news. It's not really news. We've known that dynamic events are a big thing in the MMO space, and that they were even looking to do them through the different voxel systems and the AI systems. So this is just kind of another nail in the coffin for me that they are going to implement a more dynamic system of content. Now, the big thing to take away from this is that there are some key things they need to remember, right? they might be doing a dynamic event system, but we've seen dynamic events in a couple games already, and some of it is good, some of it is bad. And here's some of the things I think they need to keep in mind when they focus on a dynamic event driven system for content for the player. The first one is they need to make the dynamic events feel as random as possible and less staged. This is by far the hardest part of implementing dynamic events in my eyes, simply because there's only so many scenarios the developer can pump out and eventually have in the game, and you'll get to that point where the repetition will sit in. You will see the same dynamic event multiple times. You will have those dynamic event occurrences happen for you on multiple occasions. Now, one of the ways to supplement this repetition is kind of in my next point, and that's if they are going for a dynamic event system, just commit 100% fully to the dynamic world idea, go for the dynamic system, and forgo the traditional quest structure altogether. Now, this was one of the faults with Guild Wars 2, and it's one of the ones that people that played MMOs prior felt as well, and that was they originally decided, we're going to go full-on dynamic world, dynamic events, this will be our quest structure. And then they found that maybe it wasn't so straightforward for people who were not maybe MMO literate, I'll say, and they decided to implement the Renowned Hearts, which were a difference compared to the normal quest system, but it wasn't different enough. I mean, you had the improvements in my eyes where you didn't have to talk to the NPC and do the task and then return to that NPC for the reward and then the follow-up quest and so on and so forth, where it was just a lot of talking to an NPC. Instead, it was just you interacting with the situation and going about your day. Now, this could have been better, I think, if they had committed 100%. And I think that SOE needs to pick up that idea and apply it here if they're looking to utilize dynamic events in their game as a way to have the players consume the gameplay, the lore, all of it really. And they need to do what ArenaNet seemingly could not bring themselves to do, and that is implement a quest system wholly based on the idea of player immersion, world interaction, and storytelling through dynamic events. A focus on exploring an AI that makes the world feel flavorful and believable. That's what they need to focus on 100% if they want to use dynamic events to the best of their ability in my eyes. Now, finally, I think SOE needs to make sure the player has incentive to explore and experience these dynamic events outside of the leveling process, outside of their first time through, outside their main character when they first start up the game. This is one of the things I think SOE would have an upper hand though compared to Guild Wars 2, for example. Now, SOE is developing EverQuest Next already with the idea of using the dynamic event system through like the voxels changing and putting in like very quick patches or these rallying calls as they've been labeled. And I think that they can take that a step further and have the dynamic events just happen and take advantage of the voxel system so that they have a little bit more believability behind their happening, and also the AI in the system coupled with the landmark thing, how they can take from the landmark building aspects, they can apply what the player base there has made and created, take some ideas from those guys and implement it in this game, and the AI can change as well with each of these rallying calls or each of these dynamic events if they decide to go 100% dynamic event focused questing, and it really would create a believable and immersive MMO experience, something that I think we haven't really seen in the market, at least in a very, very long time, if ever. Now, I think that's going to do it for me on this one, guys. Thanks so much for watching, and if you enjoyed this video and or found it even remotely informative or thought-provoking, make sure to like, subscribe, share with your friends, comment down below. Speaking of which, let me know in the comments what you guys think of EverQuest Next, and what would you guys think of it if it was indeed a very dynamic, event-driven, almost sandbox-style MMO type where you have all this content in front of you, but it's not so hand-holdy, it's much more sandboxy, and the actual content and the way you consume it would simply be something like I am interacting in and with the world. I think that sounds awesome, actually. and if done correctly, could really shift the design philosophies of game developers in the MMO space. I think that would be really awesome if they just went balls to the wall crazy, took the dynamic event idea and ran with it. I think that's what they need to do. I think that would be the best course of action for these guys. They've already done some really innovative things. Why not take this to the next level as well? You already have some of the systems in there in place that I think could improve that system. Go ahead and take it. Just grab it, run with it, guys. I really think that's what they're going to do, and I would really like to see that. So hopefully we learn more about the dynamic event systems that are potentially going to show up in EverQuest Next. But again, I think that's going to do it for me. Thanks again for watching, guys, and I will see you on the next one.